I sat across from a man worth $20 million who turned down a job offer that would have doubled his salary. When I asked why, he looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. His answer changed everything I understood about how wealthy people think about money. And it explains why most high earners never actually get rich. There's a moment that happens in most people's financial journey where income stops mattering. Not because they have so much that more doesn't help, but because they've figured out that income is the wrong game entirely. Most people never reach that moment. They spend their entire lives chasing higher salaries, thinking that's the path to wealth. The truly wealthy stopped playing that game years ago. Let me tell you about 2 dinners I had in the same week a few years back. First dinner was with James, a corporate attorney. Makes $450,000 a year. Works 70 hours a week. Stressed constantly. Complaining about his mortgage, his car payments, his kids' school tuition. Despite the massive income, he told me he feels broke most months. He's 48 years old and can't imagine retiring before 65. Second dinner was with Linda. She runs a small bookkeeping business. Makes $85,000 a year. Works maybe 30 hours a week. Relaxed. Told me she could stop working tomorrow if she wanted. She's 46 and has more financial freedom than James will likely ever have. Same city, similar age. One makes 5 times more than the other. One is significantly wealthier. The difference isn't the income. It's that Linda understands something James doesn't. Income is just potential energy. What matters is what you convert it into. James converts his income into lifestyle. Linda converts hers into assets. After 20 years, James has an expensive life he can't afford to leave. Linda has a collection of assets that pay her whether she works or not. Here's what wealthy people know that high earners don't. Every dollar you earn presents a choice. You can convert it into consumption or into production. Consumption feels good today and produces nothing tomorrow. Production might not feel like anything today, but produces forever. Poor people are forced to choose consumption because they need to survive. Rich people choose production because they're playing a different game. High earners are the tragedy in the middle. They can afford to choose production, but they choose consumption because they think that's what success looks like. James earns $450,000. After taxes, he takes home maybe $280,000. His mortgage on a house that matches his status is $80,000 a year. His cars, because he needs vehicles that signal his position, cost another $30,000 between payments and insurance. Private school for 2 kids is $60,000. Lifestyle expenses, vacations, dining, Entertainment, another 70,000. He's spending 240,000 a year, saving 40,000. At that rate, he'd need to work 30 years to save enough to replace his income. He's trapped by the very success he worked so hard to achieve. Linda earns 85,000, takes home about 60,000, lives in a modest house she bought 15 years ago for 200,000, now worth 350. Mortgage is paid off. Drives a 10-year-old car that works fine. No private school. She spends about 35,000 a year total. Banks 25,000 annually. But here's the key. She did this for 20 years. That 25,000 per year invested in boring index funds and rental properties compounded into 1.4 million. At 4% withdrawal, that's 56,000 per year. She's basically financially independent on a fraction of James's income. Think of income like raw materials delivered to a factory. High earners have massive trucks delivering materials every day. But if your factory just burns the materials for heat instead of building products, it doesn't matter how much gets delivered. You're just burning expensive fuel. The wealthy have smaller trucks, delivering less material. But every bit gets turned into products that generate value forever. James looks at his income and thinks he's winning. 450,000 is serious money. He must be doing well. But income is a flow, not a stock. It only matters while it's flowing. The moment he stops working, it stops coming. He's built a lifestyle that requires permanent flow. That's not wealth. That's a treadmill with an expensive view. Linda built a machine. Her 85,000 was always just the seed capital. She spent 20 years converting flow into stock. Now the stock generates its own flow. She can turn off the original flow anytime she wants. The machine keeps running. That's wealth. Not the size of the paycheck, the existence of the machine. This is why wealthy people don't care much about high income. They care about conversion rates. What percentage of income converts into assets? A high earner converting 10% is building slower than a modest earner converting 40%. The math is simple, but most people never do it because high income feels like winning and they don't want to question what winning means. I've watched this pattern for decades. People optimize for income their entire careers. They get promotions. They switch companies for raises. They negotiate better salaries. All good things. But they never stop to ask what they're doing with the income once they have it. They assume that more coming in automatically means more staying. It doesn't. Not even close. For most high earners, more coming in just means more going out at a slightly delayed pace. The shift happens when you stop measuring success by income and start measuring it by conversion rate. How much of what comes in gets converted into assets that produce income themselves? That's the only number that matters. A high earner with a 10% conversion rate is on a 40-year path to maybe retiring. A modest earner with a 40% conversion rate is on a 15-year path to financial independence. One has an impressive salary, the other has freedom. James will figure this out eventually. Maybe at 55, when he realizes he's not actually any closer to retiring than he was at 30. 5 despite earning millions in the intervening decades. The salary kept rising, but the assets didn't because the lifestyle rose in perfect parallel. Linda figured it out early, not because she was smarter, because she never had enough income to confuse lifestyle with wealth. Her modest earnings forced clarity. She couldn't afford to burn the materials. She had to build with them. The truly wealthy don't chase income. They chase conversion rate. Get that right and income barely matters. Get it wrong and no amount of income will ever be enough. Income is potential energy, not wealth itself. And understanding this distinction is what separates people who earn well from people who become wealthy. Most people treat income as the end goal. They think if they can just earn more, they'll be rich. But income by itself is nothing. It's like having electricity flowing into your house. The electricity isn't valuable because it's flowing. It's valuable because of what you do with it once it arrives. Let me explain what potential energy means in this context. When you earn a paycheck, that money represents possibility. You can convert into many things. You can convert it into food, shelter, entertainment, experiences. Those conversions give you immediate utility but produce nothing afterward. Or you can convert it into assets, stocks that pay dividends, real estate that generates rent, businesses that produce profit. These conversions might give you nothing immediately, but they produce income forever. The difference is that consumption conversions are terminal. Once you spend money on dinner, that money is gone and you got dinner. Transaction complete. Asset conversions are generative. You spend money on a dividend stock, and that stock pays you every quarter forever. The money isn't gone. It transformed into something that creates more money. That's the difference between potential energy and actual wealth. Here's where most people get confused. They think high income equals wealth because high income gives them access to nice things. They can afford a nice house, nice cars, nice vacations. They're living well, so they must be wealthy, right? Wrong. They're living well. That's different from being wealthy. Living well means you're consuming at a high level. Being wealthy means you've built assets that can sustain consumption without requiring your labor. I knew a doctor who made 600,000 a year, beautiful house, luxury cars, exotic vacations. Everyone thought he was rich. Then he had a health crisis at 53 and couldn't work for 2 years. Within 18 months, he was selling assets to cover his lifestyle. The income had been massive, but he'd converted almost all of it into consumption. When the income stopped, the consumption had to stop too. Painfully, publicly. That's not wealth. That's just expensive living funded by ongoing labor. Compare that to a couple I know who were both teachers. Combined income of 120,000. Modest house, normal cars, cheap vacations. But for 25 years, they converted 35% of their income into assets. Index funds mostly, some rental property. By the time they were 55, those assets were generating 50,000 a year in passive income. They could both stop working if they wanted. They chose not to, but the key word is chose. Their income had been modest, but their conversion rate was high. They built actual wealth, while the doctor built an impressive lifestyle. The potential energy metaphor helps clarify this. Think of income as water being poured into a container. High earners have a huge stream of water pouring in. But if the container has holes in the bottom, it doesn't matter how much water flows in. The container never fills. The holes are consumption. Every dollar spent on lifestyle is a hole. The bigger your lifestyle, the bigger the holes. High earners often have massive inflow and equally massive outflow. The water level never rises. Modest earners with discipline have a smaller stream of water but fewer holes. Less coming in but more staying in. Over time, their container fills while the high earner's container stays empty despite the impressive flow. The flow is potential. The level is actual. Wealth is the level, not the flow. Here's what this means practically. Every time you receive income, you're receiving potential energy. That potential can be converted into temporary utility or permanent assets. Most people default to temporary utility because it's immediately satisfying. They work hard. They deserve nice things. They've earned it. All true. But deserving and strategically wise are different concepts. You can deserve something and still recognize that buying it destroys potential without building actual wealth. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They see income as ammunition. You don't fire ammunition to hear the sound. You fire it to hit targets that matter. Every dollar spent on consumption is ammunition fired at nothing. Every dollar converted to assets is ammunition that hits a target, and that target starts producing more ammunition. Over time, the wealthy person has infinite ammunition. because their targets keep producing. The high earner runs out of ammunition the moment they stop working because they've been firing it all at nothing. This is why income size is almost irrelevant to wealth building. What matters is what percentage of that income gets converted from potential to actual. A person earning 60,000 who converts half of it into assets is building wealth faster than a person earning 300,000 who converts 10%. The absolute dollars are higher for the high earner, but the low earner's conversion rate means their wealth grows faster relative to their lifestyle. And relative to lifestyle is what determines freedom. The shift happens when you stop seeing income as something to spend and start seeing it as something to convert. Every paycheck is a batch of raw material. What are you building with it? If the answer is nothing permanent, you're earning potential energy and watching it dissipate into heat. That's not wealth. That's just expensive living. Wealth is what remains after the conversion is complete. High earners trap themselves in expensive prisons, and this is the paradox that makes high income one of the most dangerous things that can happen to someone who doesn't understand wealth building. The trap isn't obvious. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like success. And that's exactly what makes it so effective. By the time you realize you're trapped, extracting yourself requires sacrifices that feel impossible. Let me show you how the trap gets built. You're 30 years old making 70,000 a year. You live in a decent apartment. Drive a reliable used car. Go out occasionally. Your lifestyle costs about 50,000. You're saving 20,000 a year. Life is fine. Then you get promoted. Now you're making 100,000. What happens next determines everything. Most people think, I'm making 30,000 more. I can afford to live a little better. So they upgrade the apartment. Instead of 1,500 a month, now it's 2,000. Just 500 more. That's 6,000 a year, still leaving 24,000 of the raise. Then they think I should have a nicer car, something that reflects my professional status. They go from a paid, off, used car to a lease that costs 500 a month. Another 6,000 gone. Now they're at 12,000 of the 30,000 raise spent. But it doesn't stop there. The nicer apartment is in a nicer neighborhood with nicer restaurants. They start dining out more because, hey, they can afford it and everyone around them is doing it. Another few thousand. They start traveling more because they need vacations from the increased work stress. A few thousand more. They update their wardrobe because their old clothes don't fit the new environment. Another couple thousand. Before they know it, the entire 30,000 raise is absorbed. Their savings stayed at 20,000. Their income jumped, but their wealth building rate didn't. Now they're making 100,000, but they need 90,000 to maintain their lifestyle. The gap is still just 20,000. But here's where the trap activates. They can't go backward without it feeling like failure. They can't move back to the smaller apartment without explaining to everyone why they're downgrading. They can't drive a cheaper car without people wondering if they're struggling. Their lifestyle has become their identity. And identity is much harder to change than spending. 5 years later, another promotion. Now making 150,000. Same pattern. Lifestyle expands to match. Now they need 130,000 to maintain everything. Gap is still 20,000. Another 5 years, making 200,000. Needing 180,000. Gap still 20,000. They've doubled their income over a decade, and their wealth building capacity hasn't changed at all. But now they're trapped in a lifestyle that requires 200,000. They can't take a lower paying job they might prefer. They can't take time off. They can't start a business that might pay less initially. They can't do anything that interrupts the income because the lifestyle demands it. This is the expensive prison. The bars are made of mortgages, car payments, school tuitions, country club memberships, vacation expectations, and social obligations. None of these things are bad individually, but collectively, they create a cage that requires permanent high income to maintain. You're not free. You're employed by your own lifestyle. And the employment is mandatory because you've built a life that collapses without constant income. I watched someone making 400,000 a year turn down a job opportunity that was clearly better for his life. Better hours, more meaningful work, aligned with his values. But it paid 300,000. He couldn't take it. Not because he wouldn't have been comfortable on 300,000. Anyone would be comfortable on 300,000. But he'd built a life that required 400,000. The cows, the kids' schools, the vacations, all of it required the 400,000 to sustain. He was trapped by his own success.